Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So folks, I hope everyone's had coffee and you're wide awake. Thank you very much for joining us on this session and thank you all of you for giving us time regards to both this event and this presentation. Folks, one of the things that my colleague mentioned was that we're about energy and sustainability. And the thing that is happening more and more is the convergence of energy and sustainability to how do we use technology that's much more efficient and in a manner in which it makes meaning for both the business and also the environment. And that's where automation is playing a key role. Advanced automation, the use of artificial intelligence, that's becoming a key topic, a hot topic that's happening in every organization. So that's why we decided that we'll take up a case study whereby we can help share some of the insights into a typical organization that many of you would say would look similar to yours or resemble how you think, and see what they are going through and if any of these things resonate with you. So we went to this, myself and a few of my colleagues, we were contacted by a client who had been through a lot of consulting experience. They had lots of consultants, strategy consultants, operation consultants. They've done a lot of studies and many things. But what was coming up more and more from all those studies was a sense of dissatisfaction. The sense of dissatisfaction was primarily around the fact that they were going through numerous reports, they were going through numerous studies, they were going through lots of consultants as well, but things were not connecting together. Everybody would come up with something that was accurate, but it's not a question of how many accurate points do you have, it's about how do you connect the dots of everything that you need for your organization to move forward. And in this instance, this is an organization that was a refinery that was saying, in the end, when they looked at everything and we had a few sessions with them, they said, we need a maturity assessment. We need a maturity assessment, we need to find out more about our organization, we need to see how this organization can be connected together for our wishes of AI and advanced automation. So when those were addressed as to what you want as a scope, I think things became a lot simpler for us to understand how do we move forward. But most organizations struggle with this. That is typically a department hires someone for a report, another department hires somebody else for something else, and you have tons and tons of information. But that tons and tons of information can now also be helped, gathered through the internet, or people are using all types of bots, ChatGPT, so forth. But how do you make sure it makes sense for your organization? And that's where, what is it that you want? What is the scope that you want? And for us in this case, the scope was key was industrial automation, shape the future strategies. What is the deliverable that you want? In this case, it was the roadmap. And in this instance, what we did was we actually had a conversation across a department that was connecting all the features across all the organizations. So again, we all are bombarded with lots of intelligent technologies. We'll all see a lot of features come up with a lot of intelligent technologies. But then the question will come, what is it that you want? And how are you going to talk to everybody across your organization and get them together? So that purpose, that project activity is going to be key. So as in this case, I'd just like to visually show you is, you can get your inputs. You can get a lot of inputs, but what is the value add you're going to get? And in this case, from value add perspective, we said, it needs to make sure it is touching a lot of key features. It needs to make sure it touches automation, it touches alarm safety, process historian, and so forth. What happens, and I'll go back to the original thing, was a lot of times when strategy talks, they talk to the key strategists. A lot of times when you talk about AI, they talk to the IT department. Everybody else is secondary. It happens, great. It doesn't happen, doesn't matter. So what happens is, when you're determining that project feature, it doesn't exactly touch upon all the organizations because some of the portions are secondary. Now, the beauty about trying to save money, trying to make it more efficient, trying to make it more sustainable is this project scope is very critical, and also now is a very good opportunity because what we're doing is advanced automation, what we're doing is AI, and we can just connect those dots. So in the end, we had was how do we select the team? Who is relevant for this technology? I could double hat as a project manager, but then I needed specialists in my team. And we reached out to our people in Canada and the US, Peter Reynolds and Maxine Gupta. We reached out to another gentleman, Eric Cosman, and then Janice. So every one of them came with a unique feature of specialization. Now, it did not matter whether this unique feature of specialization was exactly related to AI or not. But it did matter that each one of them in their specialization need to be able to talk the language of the organization portion, the engineers, which organization uses what kind of products and what kind of requirements do they have. And that is critical. Because sometimes what happens is when we go according to AI, people will bring the AI expert only. But that's not what the organization knows. Organization wants that where I am, how can I go forward? And that is a key feature. So here, if you look at the team that we selected, it was more from experience perspective on, do you understand that ground level? So this is where I say is an important thing for people looking to roll out into AI, into automation. Look for those with the experience who can connect that dot further. Don't worry about the technology. There are lots of technologies and they'll keep changing and we can get there. So when we have to also formulate as to what is it that we ask and how do we divide the pillars, and I'd like to share some of the key features of how we develop this template. If you look at the template, it has things such as corporate culture, organization, and collaboration as three separate distinct features. Why is collaboration required in today's world? You can all answer it, but the reality is most organizations work in silos. And therefore, when you do an assessment, a lot of things you get is in silos. So the collaboration is going to be a very, very core feature if you're going to go for any advanced automation, if you're going to go for advanced AI features, or anything similar. So the measurement of collaboration in an organization is key. Now this collaboration is still very different from corporate culture. Corporate culture is how do you do things? What is it that's relevant? What is it that's rewarded? How does all that happen? And those subtlety, those nuances need to be captured. In this organization that we went to, we found the organization was very young. They were very, very technology savvy. They knew everything and more about technology, I think even more than myself. But that doesn't help. You can know a lot of technology and you can see a lot of vendor features. You can go to every single vendor's showcase, exhibition, and you can have every feature possible. But that doesn't help because you've already been through that failure curve. And it's happening because they kept measuring technology only. When you keep measuring technology, that's only one pillar. There are all different pillars: process, skill development, people, collaboration, organization, corporate culture. If you notice, most of these features are all human-centric. So in an AI world, more and more, what matters is how do you deal with the human being in that transition? What is the impact of your organization culture? What is the impact of your process? What is the impact of those subtleties of collaborations? So those features become even more important. The other things that we had to do was not just select the pillars, is what are the questions you want to ask. So in this engagement, we possibly would have met about 120 different people, and we would have had deep dive discussions of at least half an hour to 1 hour with each person. So when you go through all those details, all those reams of data, you need to be prepared with the questions. And the best thing I found out while doing this engagement was the people who I thought may not be relevant to meet, or you've kept them later, turned out to be the most important. What we go into an organization thinking what's important often turns out not to be the case. It looks more like a crime novel or something like that, but that is what happens in reality of life. Just because a part of organization does not make noise does not mean it's not relevant. Maybe that's a part of the organization that's working hardest and says, can I keep the lights on? So this and more became a very important thing, is how do you develop that maturity model How do you assess people? And my reflection on going back when I look at this is, people is where you focus more and more. Technology is an important feature, but sometimes in our world right now that gets too enlarged. Now, the other thing that a lot of people don't worry about too much nowadays is skill development. People do the engineering degrees, people do a few other features, people also learn AI and so on from a lot of the technology exhibitions and so forth, and we think that's it. That's what skill development is. But sometimes it's not. And also, skill development doesn't mean that you have someone who's savvy on some piece and let that thing roll over. And let me give you a key example. In this instance, we came across a lot of managers who were responsible for assets, but they did not know how the cybersecurity of the assets worked. They were totally relying on the IT side of the department of the cybersecurity. Now, it's not that the IT department will take a wrong decision for them, but it is that if you are accountable for something, you've got to decide how can your skills be developed forward. Because it's critical, because your feature or your reaction to that asset might be quite different from the person who has now been told to take on your behalf. And a lot of times it's not the IT department does something wrong, but it's just that they're put in a spot without knowing what is the true features of the asset. But again, this again comes as to how do you go about engaging with the people, how much empowerment are you giving to the people, and how much emphasis are you giving that, look, these assets need to be taken care of, and I need to make sure my team is trained better. So when we were measuring them, we measured them on these things, and the results were quite interesting. We found every single kind of software there. We also found people who knew the software very well, but it's not necessarily the person who's accountable knew that well. So when the measurements happened, one of the things we did was measuring them against other organizations across the globe and so forth. Now remember, it doesn't mean you need to be absolutely the best. Sometimes being the complete best doesn't make sense because it's not pragmatic, or being the complete best is not even a feature right now in the industry by itself. So how do you measure yourself against the peers? Where do you define your organization against others? Those things matter a lot. But again and again, what I'm saying is, a lot of things that matter is people skills. A lot of things that matter is how is your organization governed and what you do about that. We worked on benchmarking with a lot of clients, and therefore, we were able to get a lot of data for them to help them support their journey. That was useful. But at the end of it, when I look back, some of the key features on the observations is something I go back to again and again, and sometimes despite the fact that we're moving so high up in the technology curve and doing so well in terms of what the new features are, we still come across a key problem, which is whatever business cases you're doing, whatever work you're doing, how much is that related to your core business? A lot of times the technology features and so on work really well. A lot of times the pilots also work very well, but is that actually being done on your core business? Where are you on the core business is an important feature. The other thing is, when you're looking at the core business and where the feature is, maybe that's where it will also come as how much of an overspend of technology have you done? What I found is a lot of times the technology is sometimes used as a driver to make change, and more than often people say, well, that's where I'll also get the profit because the technology is going to cut so many steps forward. But more than often the failure happens. And the failure is again not about the technology, but it is because one or two departments say, well, I can take this forward and deliver that. But you haven't really embraced the rest of the organization to move forward with you. And that's where it becomes very important that you collaborate, the culture of listening to the other sections of the organization. Whenever new technology is to be adopted, how well have we brought that in? In this subtle change that we did, or the interviews we did, we realized there's a feature called how much of empowerment do you give to your project manager, or how much of empowerment are you giving to your procurement to go through all the departments for an approval before you go forward. All that and more will be very supportive. Last but not the least, the person who's purchasing is accountable. The person who's got the asset is accountable for the cybersecurity. if he is not trained or if she is not trained, that's something that needs to be thought through. While recommending, we used some of our ARC's approaches that we've seen before that work: measure, analyze, improve. It is very typical in engineering, we see that, but again and again, you have to go through the steps. And in this case, even when you're looking at technologies which are to do with advanced automation, artificial intelligence, you have to find a way to measure. You have to find a way. If you can't measure, how do you know the core business will get some value later on? And more than often, when you see that people say, well, this time it's different, you will see there's a whole lot of failures in the organization that have happened before. They need to cover them, then they move to another one, and that loop continues. So that gap, it needs to be identified, and we need to move forward. Some of the things that we've always used is how do we measure autonomous operations, key features. From industrial consulting perspective, we did a few other details as well in terms of technology and architecture. But core feature of, I think, our engagement success was on the fact that we have to understand the end user. Is the experience you bring to the table, who understand each feature of the organization from specialty perspective, the data of benchmark, and knowledge of the suppliers as well. So these are kind of holistic things, and what happens is when we look back at a lot of reports, they were wonderful and accurate at covering portion of it. But if it's a full elephant, it's not just getting the tail or the trunk or the ears. You can't do that blindfolded. You have to know everything. So that's where I'll leave you all. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Vikram, for your nice